Ooh, hey, what's up, universe? It is 6:27 p.m. on Sunday, July 2nd, 2023. So there's a lot that I could talk about in this update. And I haven't put together all my ideas. This is one of those times where I'm like, all right, I gotta just put something out there because I just keep, my mind keeps getting blown by what? So, before I get into the whole mind-blowing things, it was either Friday or Saturday, this is a completely random thing, that some dude, I'd left the gate on the property open so that the lawn care people could come by, and I believe this was probably Friday. So I left the gate open, they came, they did their thing, I left the gate open after they left for a minute, and some dude just pulls right in, gets out of his truck and is like, hey, what's up? And I'm like, I go outside because I can see him pulling in, and I'm like, who is that? And it was just some random guy. He's like, yeah, I saw the house was for rent, for sale, and I'm like, because I go out there and I'm like, can I help you? And he's so nonchalant about it, like it's not a big deal to drive up on somebody's property. Like in the suburbs, it's one thing, like you have a driveway, a small yard, like there's not a gate around my property, like this kind of a thing. Here, I've got a perimeter, I've got a large piece of land, there's a gate, like it's a completely different energy and a completely different setup. The house is set back pretty far, like you've seen it if you've looked at the videos, like, so just to drive up, like that's a different thing to me. And I'm like, I wouldn't just drive up to somebody's place like that, into their space. A driveway is a little different. I even feel weird about pulling into a driveway. Like if I need to turn around, I'm kind of like, I'm going to make this real quick. But this is a whole different thing. So I thought that was an interesting experience. He asked me about the land. I was like, I'm renting the place. And, we kind of talked about it for a minute. But he just seemed very, very calm and cool, like it was totally okay. And I'm like, my home is kind of something where I it's my sanctuary, so I'm protective of it. So I just found it kind of odd. All right, enough of that. The thing that's really more the inspiration for this video is about numbers, right? So I had showed the book about Michael Schneider's The Beginner's Guide to Constructing the Universe, and was like, okay, I'm going to start doing some research into the numbers and things like that, especially like the number 7 and the number 5, because they've been coming up, right? Especially the number 7 recently. I still see 55 pretty regularly. All right, so I used April 14th, 2023 as kind of like this pivot point or this genesis point, because that's the date that I started doing these Instagram posts, right? So I'm like, all right, I'll just pick that as my point in a time, right? And so I was like, after reading about the number 7, I'm like, let's start checking out 7-day intervals, right? And seeing what happens on these different intervals. And so I started writing this out. I've got my notebook, right? So I have a lot of stuff that I wrote. And then I realized I was calculating the dates wrong about halfway through. And there's obviously things that are going on, right? So before I get into it, there's another thing about calculating time and duration. And I talked to my oldest son about this philosophically, because I was like, how would you approach it? And this is something I've dealt with dates and time in a lot of different ways on the computer. And, do you include the last day as part of the calculation or not? Do you include the first day? In this particular, what I'm looking for here is, I'm starting to count 7 days out, right? So do I count the beginning point? Do I count April 14th, 2023 as a day? Is that point 1, or is 7 days out the beginning, point 1? And for me, it's always been intuitive to make, April 14th, 2023, 1, right? Not 0, 1. And then each thing after that is another interval. And so anyway, that's just part of the consideration, because it has to, defining that obviously is going to impact the number, right? And you'll see that as I go through it. So we're going to say that April 14th, 2023 is basically day one. And if we start measuring weeks, I'm going to consider that like week one, right? So just to be clear about that. Okay, so that's our Genesis point. And then so 7 days out from the 14th of April would be April 21st, 2023. And that is when I put out the prompt engineering post about we are all prompt engineers. Now, I had made this video back in April, but I posted it. I can't remember if it was on LinkedIn, but I started sharing it like on the 21st. So I'm like, okay, well, that's interesting. And that article is one of like, there's claps on Medium, right? That's my highest clapped article so far. And I've only published it like 2 or 3 days ago. And so it's interesting, right? But I wrote basically the gist of it, or at least what the article is based off of, like really came out on April 21st, 2023. So then 7 days after that, April 28th, right? So this is like where, I have a new phone, like I just got a new phone. There's a lot of communications going on that day. There was talks with Jason about the lease and closing the gaps on the funds. And so it was a day of communication. And then 7 days after that is May 5th, 2023. That's when I got rid of my old Android phone at 9:09 p.m. I got a last minute Airbnb. It was my last day at Apple. There was a lot of big things going on. 7 days after May 5th is May 12th. That's when I moved into the house. And then on the 7 days after that would be May 19th, 2023. And I don't have any Instagram posts for that date, but when I went back and looked, I'm like, oh, this is when this was like that weekend or that 2 or 3 days of like pretty like involved communications with that woman that I knew from my childhood that I never met, right? And so there was that interaction with her for those 3 days. And I was like, 7 days after that is May 26th. And that's when I do that's when I do my first Postman demo for the Zendesk developer user groups. And that's when I had prepared for it, and then I kind of messed up a part, and there was vulnerability and just kind of managing myself while I'm giving a presentation. I'm kind of fumbling, and it was also one of the more kind of practical demonstrations for that group, because Postman is a tool that not only developers but administrators can use, and so it was a very practical thing for that group. So there's that. 7 days after that is June 2nd, 2023. And let's see. Sorry, I am taking a look here about this. Oh, let's see. Yeah, so I was talking about on that day, there was a huge amount of transcripts for that day, and I was talking about like astrology and giving things attention and personal sovereignty. I'm trying to think. There seems like there might be something a little bit more relevant on that. I'm just going to keep going though. So 7 days after June 2nd would have been June 9th, right? And that's the 9th is when I visit my mom in the hospital. 7 days after that is June 16th, and that's when I sent my friend a text to check in, and he is the one that I went to go visit and helped him out with his yard, so I checked in. So there's that. 7 days after that is June 23rd. And that's, let's see. Sorry, I made notes, but this video actually, okay, so June 23rd is the video where, if you recall, because it wasn't horribly long ago, I held up the thermometer and it showed 777, and I was like, that's nice, and I was feeling support. So it's funny because these patterns are about 7, and on that day it was 777. And then if you take the number of intervals so far, this would be the 12th interval, right? Which is interesting because 12 and 7 have a relationship with each other, and I haven't even gotten into the book yet, right? The Beginner's Guide to Constructing the Universe. So on that day, on the 23rd, I was talking about feeling support. That was my last Zendesk Developer User Groups meeting, and it's probably my very last one, which is interesting too, because 12 and the way that represents its own kind of complete cycle. And then, so there was that. And then, so 7 days after the 23rd of June would have been June 30th, 2023. And this is when I created Being an Artist, the publication Being an Artist on Medium. And that's kind of a big deal, honestly. And then 7 days after June 30th, we're not there yet. I am not sure. So there's some really interesting things. So once I started to see that there's these interesting life events that there seems to be some type of pattern involved here, I was like, all right, well, let me take a look at other things to consider. What about the other numbers, right? What about intervals that are not 7 days apart? What about intervals that are 3 days apart? Or intervals that are 5 days and other numbers apart, right? And so I worked with ChatGPT and I was like, hey, let's write a script that can calculate this and generate these dates based on arbitrary input. I want to be able to put in a start date. I want to put in the number of days to create the interval with, and some other things, right? So we got this script all created, and I got these dates generated, and probably for the last couple of hours, I've been going through these dates that were generated based on these different day intervals, and going through old emails, text messages. I even sent Angela a text because I was like, when did I propose to you? I was like, I know this is going to seem really random. I was like, I got my own reasons for asking, and I kind of let her know I don't really expect her to respond. Although I'm curious, because I remember around that specific event, I remember pretty much all of the details. I just cannot recall the time of year. I just can't. It seems like it may have been during the winter time, although I'm not for sure. So that's why I was asking her. I was like, because I'm curious. So here's what I did. One of the things that at the script that I had ChatGPT help me write, it doesn't just calculate the intervals, right? It doesn't just say, okay, give me the start date. And so I would put in, in this example, 2023-04-14, right? So April 14th, 2023. Because that's the point in time, I'm like, I've already got data. I seem to have some patterns based off that date. So let's start with that, and then I can move forward or backward in time, and I'll feed it a date, maybe I want to go into the future and calculate the intervals going into the future. Maybe I want to look at the past, calculate the intervals going backward. So I've been going backward because that's in my past, and I have the potential to look up data to see what patterns may exist, if any. So this is just kind of an intellectual, what's going on here. So I started off with the number 7, right? And so I just went through that pattern with you with the number 7. So I decided that what was going to be interesting to me was not just the days, right? Not just like, hey, 7 days or 5 days or 3 days, like after the 14th of April or before the 14th of April. I wanted to know, because I started to see, I had a counter, right? It would show me like the intervals. I'm like, okay, show me like not just the date, but the number of the number of the sequence of the interval, right? So in this example, we'll say like, if I'm going backwards in time, March 3rd, 2023 would be like 7 weeks. That's 7 intervals back from April 14th, 2023, right? Isn't it? Yeah, that should be right. Because again, this is where it comes into the calculation, right? Because again, we are counting the 14th as one. So that should be right. It should be 7 back, would be April 3rd. Sorry, March 3rd, 2023. Okay, so what I wanted to do, and then say, actually, that's not gonna be a good example. We'll go back to the one, like another example would be, say, December 30th, 2022. Right, so that's 16 weeks back. That's 16 intervals of 7. And so what I wanted to do is take the number of the interval, right? Say 16. Well, in the Beginner's Guide to Constructing the Universe, the numbers 1 through 10 are basically the numbers of creating the universe, right? And if you get into numerology and stuff like that, you basically know that you reduce the numbers down to 1. You add them all together. So in this regard, 16 would be 7 because 1 plus 6, right? So I was like, I'm curious, just because numbers, there's a relationship, there's an interplay between all of it, right? So I'm like, okay, well, let me see what the number is of the interval, right? So the script now like basically takes the number of the interval, takes numbers like 16, and it makes them, like 7, right? So now I can see not only just the interval, be like, okay, this is the 16th interval of 7 days, right? But now it's showing me that the sum of the interval, right? The sum, so 1 plus 6 of the interval, it's interval 16, so the sum of that is 7, right? And so now the script, now I'm able to say, hey, generate a list of dates and show me only the dates that have a sum of the interval of a specific number. Does that make sense? So if I wanted to see only the dates that had an interval that added up to the number 7, that's what I'm interested in. And so that's what I did. So now I've got interval like 7, 16, 25, 34, 43, 52, 61, 70, 106, 115, 124. You see what I mean? Like, so I have those dates that are correlated to those intervals, right? And those intervals add up to the number 7. I happen to be looking at 7-day intervals as well, right? So I was just kind of like, let's just keep with the theme of 7. And then I'm like, okay, now that I have these dates, and not only are they 7 days apart, the sum of their interval also equals 7, right? And I'm like, are there any patterns that come out with that? And that's been really very interesting, because I also then decided, okay, let's change it up. Let's look at other patterns, right? Let's take a look and see. Let's keep with the 7-day interval. So I stayed with that. Yet let me take a look at 7-day intervals where the sum of the interval is, say, the number 3. So you've got, interval 3 of 7 out. You've got 12 intervals of 7, even 21 intervals of 7, 30 intervals of 7, and the dates that correlate with those intervals. And then I was like, okay, well, let's take a look at the number 5, right? I guess I did 3, 7, 5, and I just did the number 9. The thing that made me even do this was I just was like, okay, let me take a look at the number 9. And the script will tell me like the total number of intervals, because what I started to do is like, let's just go back to the day that I was born, right? I'm just going to generate the dates from from April 14th, 2023, all the way back to the day that I was born, to my birthday. So it then totals out and says like, hey, for, the total number of 9-day intervals, that's not proper. I need to fix the language in that. The total number of 7-day intervals that were the sum of the interval equals 9 is 123. So 1, 2, 3. So I just thought that was hilarious, because I'm like, the number 9, from the day that I was born to April 14th, 2023, there are 123 7-day intervals where the interval number itself, the sum of that interval number, equals 9. And I thought that was hilarious, because 1, 2, 3 is obviously a sequential number. The number 9 resonates with I could just read you this whole book, but I won't. It's perfection, right? Like dressing to the nines. There's a whole lot of examples, and I'm just pulling from my head about the number 9, and I just found it hilarious. So I went through anyway and started just taking these different intervals, right? Okay, so we'll just go, for the sum of 3. And so the first one back was March 31st, 2023. And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I have audio journals from that time, but I don't have them transcribed. So I don't have data I can go search, it's not in a text format. So I'm like, well, I'm unsure. So then the next one back from March 31st, 2023 was January 27th, 2023. And that's interval 12. 12 equals 3, 1 plus 2. And these are 7-day intervals again. And on January 27th, 2023, that was the date that I received the day that Reese and I would have our divorce hearing. So January 27th, 2023, which is the 12th interval, which is a 3, that's when the date of the divorce hearing was set. And if you look at the number 3, again, I could read you the whole book, because there's symbolism in all of these numbers. That's where it really comes down to. You're like, okay, great, it's the number, but it's the quality of the number, it's the symbolism of the number. More or less with the number 3, just think of things are coming through. I mean, that's in the word through. Things are coming, it's materializing. It's being born. And I was like, okay. So then the next interval before that one is November 25th, 2022. I'm not entirely sure what was going on that day specifically. I do know that that's the day after Thanksgiving, and I was spending Thanksgiving with Reese, and that was an interesting time for us. I honestly can't say that this is I just know that was an event that was going on. I don't remember specifics that would be relative to this right here. So then the next interval, right, would be, and I found this fascinating, the dates, because sometimes there would be years, 12 years between an interval that added up to the number that I was looking at. I was like, holy smokes, man. Of 7-day intervals, right? Now, if I change the interval, the duration of the interval, that's going to obviously impact that calculation. But I'm working with 7-day intervals here. And so it would have been the one after November 25th, 2022 would be September 23rd, 2022. September 23rd, 2022, I went to Home Depot, and I can't, it's on my phone. I would show you, because I had to go look it up. I found it so interesting that I didn't have this recorded in any other way, not even in my transcribed audio journals. I did have a journal for a day after when I was talking about the 23rd of September 2022. So I have an audio journal for September 24th, 2022, where I'm talking about September 23rd, 2022. Well, I was like, I had a really strong feeling. I'm like, the 23rd of September 2022, that's when I proposed to Reese. I'm like, I would bet money on it. I almost guarantee it. Like, I feel really strongly about this. And so I went back through my purchase history on my phone, and I went back to September and found it, and the 23rd, and there it is, Home Depot, at like 10:42 a.m. And I'm like, I bought a key to the house that I was in. And it wasn't just a key, it was a Chiefs key. It was a Chiefs themed key, right? Because I live in Kansas City. And I'll admit, it was a little bit tongue-in-cheek. There was probably, let's just be honest. Let's be transparent. There was some ego involved. We had just won the Super Bowl, this kind of a thing. There's other reasons. But regardless, I bought a key. And I proposed on the same day. On the same day I bought the key, I proposed to Reese. That's interesting, right? Because if we go back just a couple of intervals, right? So even if we start there, September 23rd, 2022, boom, I proposed to Reese. There's Thanksgiving, right? That's the other interval. Then the third interval, which would have been January 27th, 2023, that's when the divorce date was set. And I'm like, what is going on? So then I'm like, okay, well, let's take a look at the sum of other intervals. Let's take a look at something other than number 3 for the sum of the interval. Let's take a look at 7. So we got 7-day intervals where the sum of the interval is also 7. So we have dates like interval 43, if we're going backwards from April 14th, 2023, and we look at interval 47, or 43, I should say, of 7 days, that puts us at June 24th, 2022. Me and the boys went out to visit Reese during that time. That's I think the first day. I think it was from the 24th. Yeah, it was basically the 24th through July 5th when we were out there. And I'm like, okay. There's other things too. So another interval where it equaled 7 is going to be April 9th, 2021. And that marked a 2-month period where I wasn't talking to Reese. There's another date of March 27th, 2020. And that's when that TCP program, it was right around when that started, right there. I think that it started that day or the 26th. I went back and found an email on the 26th, and they said they extended the sign-up date for another 24 hours. Because remember, back in that time, COVID was just starting to be a thing. It started happening in February and then March, and by March 26th or 7th, it was definitely in bloom. But yeah, so that's that's part of what they put there. That's why they extended it. But it's related to that program. I went back even further, right? I had other dates. I was like, okay, so go far back, 430 intervals, right? 430 intervals back from April 14th, 2023 puts us at January 23rd, January 23rd, 2015. And that is when, 2015, in January 2015, my divorce to Angela was final September of 2014. So literally just a few months, right? I had no business dating. I seriously didn't have any business dating anybody. But I did for a minute Well, that day is one of those days that I went out on a date with a woman. We go back, like the next interval before that, this is one of those times when there's like years between it, right? So the next interval for the number 7 is going to be September 6th, 2013, right? So September 6th, 2013, and then the next interval is going to be January 23rd, 2015, right? Where the sum of the interval equals 7. So anyway, the one on September 6th, 2013, I found an email that I'd written to, and this is interesting, this is communication to that friend the person that I have disassociated with, basically. I wrote them a lot of emails for a long time just to send them information. They didn't necessarily reply, right? I don't even know if they read them all, but there's this person is who I used to send a lot of stuff to. That email, and again, I could show you this. I can actually show you this one. I don't have it pulled up. I don't necessarily want to pull it up. But the email itself is about the number 7. I should just pull it up. Let me just pull it up. It's ridiculous. I can do this pretty quick. I was like, you're kidding, right? So what I've been doing is I just go into my Gmail and I set an after date and a before date, and then show me the emails that are that one day that I'm looking for, and then I just kind of see what I can find, right? So if we do like this, okay, let's do it and I think like this, right? Nope, that's wrong. Let's do it like that. After. Sorry. So I think I've got these mixed up here. There we go. Right? Right. Right. So let me see if I can kind of show this without getting right? I was reading about the number 7. You see that? This one contacted me 7 months ago. You know what I mean? I can't make that up. I can't make it up. Here, I'll show you the date too, just so you know, right? Right? And so here, to kind of show you, this is what I'm talking about, right? Here's the date interval. This is what I'm talking about. This is the list that I have generated. So September 6th, 2023. And, here. September 6th, 2023. Right? 7 months ago, I was reading about the number 7. What? What? Seriously, I can't make that up. I can't make that up. So there's just a number of things like that, right? Okay. And then I have other examples from other dates with the number 7. There's questions when did I propose to Angela? Angela moved out of my apartment in 2001 around my birthday. I feel the date that I'm man, I feel if it, and I didn't ask her that to clarify. I was when did you move out? I didn't ask her that. But it seems like that might be the date, although I'm really unsure. So that's totally speculative. There's the question of back in 1999, when did I start to date Angela? And I was man, or when did, I had an experience in the summer of 1999 that was very, very formative for me. I was a late bloomer when it came to marijuana. 1999, the summer of 1999 is when I had my very first experience with it. And I want to say that date, it's very, very likely that July 16th, 1999 could have been like the day, because what I remember is that within 6 weeks of me having my first contact with that, I got put on diversion, and I went immediately to K-State. So I know like 6 weeks from July 16th would be towards the end of August, which would be the beginning of school. So I'm like, I don't know if that's accurate. Again, that's speculation. I don't have hard data on that, but I'm like, what's going on? Like, this is so interesting. And then there's other dates from like 1997. When did I start to date Jen, which was my college girlfriend? And then there's like before then in like 1996, I'm like, when did I start calling Angela? Because back in high school, I remember sitting in my room, had the directory for the school. Angela and I were in a class together all year, and we'd become friends, and I was just like, I'm gonna call her. And so it was the summertime that I called her, and I don't know if that was the date, like June 7th, 1996. I don't know. That's why I'm like, so I have a question, like, when did it start? But what I'm trying to get at here is that there's things where I'm like, what's going on? There's life events that, again, I haven't tied it into the actual like number part yet, like the symbolism of the number, but I'm like, there are just some patterns that seem to be emerging. So here's another thing, right? So I move on. I didn't actually do the number 3 twice now that I'm seeing it. I did the number 12, right? I want to do the number 12. So we start, the first interval back from from the first interval where the sum equals 12. That's where the interval starts at April 14th, 2023, is July 22nd, 2022. And that's the day after the trip that I had with Reese. We had gotten an Airbnb in Culver City, and it was probably our best trip together, honestly, and it was an amazing time. And so it's just kind of curious. So like, okay. And then, so the interval prior to that one, that equals 12, right, where the sum equals 12, is May 20th, 2022. May 2022 was crappy. I had scheduled 2 different flights to go out and see Reese, and both of them had to get canceled. Just wasn't able to go out there. So on the 20th is the day that I canceled my second trip out there. And then prior to that, prior to the May 20th date in 2022, is going to be March 18th, 2022. And I'm like, man, I don't know for sure on this one either. I don't have hard data on this, but I was visiting Reese. I was out there seeing her. And I know for a fact that it was during that time, and it could have been this day, it was during that trip that it really sunk in with me, where I'm like, let's make this work. Like, we can totally do this. And I just remember feeling it. I'm like, we can make everything that we want, that we had envisioned. We can make this happen. And I just remember getting really charged by that, and totally gung ho. And so I just found that interesting, right? And then we go back, and I didn't necessarily look at all the other dates. If we go back to one of the dates that caught my attention right off the bat was October 30th, 2020. There's some dates in between the date that I just spoke about in March 18th, 2022. But October 30th, 2020, I posted a 3-hour-long Facebook video where basically I just went through my whole chronological stuff with Reese. And it was, that's the date I posted it. So that was a really big deal. Honestly. And I haven't gone back through the dates on that one, always, just because there's a lot on that one. And then I was like, okay, well, how about intervals where the sum is 5, right? Let's take a look at that. So we've taken a look at 3, we've taken a look at 7, we've taken a look at 12, and now we're going to take a look at 5. Okay. Well, let's go to this. the first interval back from where the sum of the interval equals 5, the first interval backwards where that's the case from April 14th, 2023 is going to be March 17th, 2023. I don't have any data for that necessarily. I have an audio journal, I know for a fact. Again, it's not transcribed. So I don't know the details for that one specifically. So then the next one is going to be January 13th, 2023. Well, we know that 2 weeks after that point, on the 27th, that's when the divorce date was provided, right? And that's for interval 7. For interval 5, on January 13th, 2023, the initial papers for the divorce were provided. And that's from my friend, right? That's from that, right? So he's the one that mediated it. So on the 13th of January, he provided us the initial papers. And then the interval prior to that was November 11th, 2022. And on that day, I purchased whitelotusapps.com, which is the domain that I use. And it's basically all tied to the Zendesk user group stuff. It's tied to the software development and all of that kind of thing. So I purchased that domain during an interval like that. Prior to that, the next interval in line backwards is going to be September 9th, 2022. That's the day that I moved in. That's the day that I moved in to the other house, the house that I left before I got into this one. And then, let's see. I have some other dates about this too. Like there's, but I haven't like really solidified that stuff. And then the number 9, like I said, I haven't looked at any of these dates yet because I just caught the total number of being 123. I'm like, all right, I just got to say something. I've been talking for a long time now. It's 1909, by the way, 709. But I'm not going to like read everything out of this book. I'm not even going to get like super into it right now because I've been talking for a while. The thing that I would like to read is about the relationship between 7 and 12. Okay. There's just some words in here sometimes where I'm like, I'm not sure I'll pronounce that right, but I think I'm going to be okay with these. All right, so the section says, while 12 has relations with all numbers within the decad, 7 has none. 7 is the hidden, unborn, eternally elusive side of 12. 7 and 12 are associated so often in myth and legend that it becomes obvious that they refer to a system of symbolic philosophy. It was noted earlier that 12 vultures showed Romulus the 7 hills on which to found Rome. Let's see. There's other things about like the Greek pantheon of 12 deities was, yeah, did I say that right? Anyway, pantheon, sorry about that. 12 deities represented on earth by the 7, and this is the word, I'm just going to call them 7 wise men. Most widely noticed is the association between the 7 nomadic planets, from the Greek for wanderers. So in classic astrology, you have the 7 lights, basically. It's another way to refer to them as, or the 7 planets, the 7 stars, so to speak, or the 7 wanderers. Yeah, there's a lot of words for them, but there's 7. So in classical astrology and the medieval astrology that I studied, you've got the 2 lights primarily, which are the moon and the sun. And then you have Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. The outer planets they're not used in classical or medieval astrology. Those are more definitely like contemporary astrology. I still use them in my interpretations and considerations and things like that. But my foundation, my fundamental, when I'm doing predictive kind of analysis, uses information and models from the medieval astrology. So anyway, back to the number 7 and 12, right? So we have, most widely noticed was the association between the 7 nomadic planets whose courses change periodically against the backdrop of 12 fixed zodiacal constellations. In the Kabbalah, the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet are divided into 3 groups of 3, 7, and 12, representing on one level our deeper self, the solar system, and the galaxy. 712 also describes the essential relationship between the modern 7-note diatonic and 12-note chromatic musical scales. The chromatic 12 scale includes the diatonic 7 scale plus 5 sharps or flats between them, giving them the scale shadings of musical color, chroma. The modern piano of 88 keys displays 7 1/3 chromatic scales within the approximately 10 octaves of human hearing. The Chinese, Polynesian, and Scottish 5-note pentonic musical scale, which most easily produces the feel of yearning, is made of 5 of these 12 notes. And so it just is, it's just the interesting relationship between 7 and 12. And again, like I said, I feel like there's more that I can tie this into. This is, you're witnessing me like knowing that there's a relationship here, and I'm working on like really like gelling that together into something that's like practical, tangible, something that's relatable. And I'm just curious about what is going on, because I'm like, and this is what I would talk about. This is the kind of stuff that I would run into like when I studied astrology and things like that, where I'm like, okay, there's these patterns, and what's that about? You know what I mean? Like things that I can't make up, you know, like that email, right? That email where the interval equals 7, and I was like, hey, and I'm talking about the number 7, and that's from like 20 years ago. 20 years ago. And what? Like, that's crazy. Maybe not 20 years ago. It's at least from 10 years ago, right? That's from the 2013. Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's from like not the recent past. So there's that. I just had to share this with you all. I appreciate you being with me. This was a longer video, and these kinds of things, when I get into these more practical and demonstrative and illustrative types of things, are going to be longer form. So I'll just kind of preface that, I guess. I guess it's not really a preface, it's more of a conclusion, since I'm wrapping this up. So anyway, there will be more to come on this, and I'm just trying to think if there's anything else. Not so much. I've got 46 articles published on Medium. I'm going to continue publishing those and wrap up everything and get it current, so I'm excited about that. And like I said, the very interesting thing is that prompt engineering one is a very, that receives a decent amount of interaction, both on LinkedIn and on Medium. I'm just kind of curious about that too. And that one's about our vibration and how my inner vibration is my prompt to the universe to attract what it is that I experience. And so anyway, don't need to keep going on about that. All right. I'm obviously excited. I'm kind of animated. I'm also very warm. I need to turn these fans back on. So I'm going to do that. All right. Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for journeying with me. Thank you for giving me some time and some space. And just thank you for your presence. All right. I love you guys. I'll talk to you later. Bye.